In this tutorial, we are going to go over the clinical bacteriology report form. In this first section, we have the information about our laboratory, and then we need to choose what challenge we need to report. Next one is sample, and there we have a section where to report the cells. First, we need to report if we see neutrophils. We have the option to report per oil immersion field or low power field. Same thing with epithelial cells. You can choose both formats. And if you want to report any other kind of cells, you can use this section to report. Let's report on red blood cells. Next one, you have a section where to report the bacteria. And here you're going to write the morphology of what you see. And you can also report the count. If you have more than one morphology to report, you have to click on the plus sign at the end of the row, and that will open another row for you to report the result. In the next section, you can check if you want to report to public health or infection control, and as usual, the comment section. Let's click submit, and then we can click submit another form to continue reporting results. Next, we are going to report the first sample. Let's choose the sample type. And here you can indicate if your lab processed or not the sample. If your lab does not process the sample, you can click this option here. Or if your lab prefers the sample, you can click the last option. And that will be the end of the form. You will have a space for comments if you want, but you won't have any other field to fill. You click the submit button and you move on to the next. If your lab does process a sample, then you will click yes. Or you would like to fill in the form for educational purposes, you could click any of these two radio buttons and you move on to the section where you fill in all the information. In the identification field, you will report the organism that you isolate. Next one, you can report the test that you perform to identify the organism. You can report as many as you want. Let's support 3 here. Remember, you can click the plus button at the end of the row to add more rows. Report up again. Hemolysis. And gram. That's it. Next, we can indicate if our lab will perform susceptibility of this organism. We click yes, a whole section to report the susceptibility reports will open up. We can indicate the method or methods that we use to perform susceptibility. And then we can choose the antibiotics that we would like to report. Let's click cefotaxime, penicillin, and vancomycin. So here, each antibiotic that you selected will show, and you will be able to indicate the interpretation and MIC or zone diameter that you obtain. For cefotaxime, you will notice also that in certain antibiotics you have these interpretations that differ depending on if it is meningitis or non-meningitis. This is only applicable to Streptococcus pneumonia, so you will not use this to report susceptibility for any other organism. In this case, it's a Streptococcus pneumonia, so let's choose susceptible meningitis and non-meningitis with an MIC of 0.5. In penicillin, we'll choose resistant to meningitis, susceptible, non-meningitis, MIC1, and vancomycin, susceptible, MIC of lower or equal to 0.38. If you want to report an antibiotic that is not listed here, you can click this last option, not listed, and it will open up a field where you can actually write down the antibiotic. Click X, and you can also fill in the interpretation. Okay. And you can also fill in another susceptibility test that you may have performed, like t-test, OXA screen, ESBL for another organism, and the result that you obtain. And lastly, you have a section here to comment on the susceptibility results. Anything that you want to report or say about the susceptibility, you can fill it up here. Next, you can indicate if you will notify public health or infection control. And lastly, you can fill in any comments that you have about this particular sample. When you're done, just click the Submit button. Next, I want to show you a couple of variations depending on the sample type that we select. First, we're going to see the gram stain. If the sample type is a sputum, you will have the same fields that you had before, and an additional section here that is suitability for culture, where you would indicate if the sample is suitable or not for culture, depending on the results that you obtain from the gram. Another case is the gram stain with vaginal smear. You still have the cells section, the bacteria sections, and you can add different morphologies as before, but then you will have two new fields, the Nugent score and the vaginal specimen interpretation, where you would write down if the specimen or the smear is consistent with bacterial vaginosis or not. The last case that I want to mention, this time for a culture sample, is the urine sample. When you select urine as a sample type, you will have now a field to report the colony count. If you have a second organism that you want to report the colony count, you can click yes here, and then you can report the colony count for the second organism. Finally, if we want to report a paper challenge, we will select here paper challenge as the sample type, and you will have the scenario written here under the scenario heading, and you will have different options to select depending on the scenario presented. Again, you will have the general comments to add and the submit.